All right, welcome back to Pod of the Century. Galen Clavio, Jack Edwards, Daniel Eaves joining you today. It's 4:34 Eastern time in the United States here, as we have just watched the conclusion of the third of three matches today, as the U.S. and Wales draw 1-1, and then earlier on, Netherlands knocks off Senegal 2-0, and England, I think England's still scoring, actually, right now. That was not a close game. We're going to talk through everything that we saw today. We're happy to take your questions. If you'd like to leave a question, you can either comment on the Twitter feed or you can comment via YouTube. Either way is fine. We'll be able to pop your questions up on screen. And if you're listening to this after the fact, thank you. For those of you watching in real time or listening after the fact, be sure to subscribe to Pod of the Century. We're available on Apple Podcasts. We're also available on Spotify and pretty much everywhere that you can get podcasts. So, gentlemen, we'll just dive right into it. Let's start with the most recent game. We'll work our way backwards, kind of. USA won, Wales won. This was a game that the U.S. looked really good in. For the first half, looked like by far the better and more incisive team. Wales looked slow. Wales looked like they were trying to fall into a defensive shell, and then that kind of fell apart with that nifty pass and score in the first half. And then it all kind of fell apart for the United States going into the second half, as they didn't really adapt to soaking up pressure and playing more counterattacking, some questionable substitutions, and a really bad foul in the box by Zimmerman, which led directly to maybe the heaviest penalty I think I've ever seen. That was like a John Bonham level penalty kick by Gareth Bale as he knocks it into the back of the net. And U.S. kind of survives at the end 1-1. Jack, let me start with you. This USA team really needed a win in this game. Certainly a draw is okay, but what were your overall take-home impressions from the first game?
I think it was just a case of the big thing that I was waiting for to happen in this match was when Kiefer Moore came on for Wales. He's a 6'5". He's an absolute giant forward. The United States was able to handle Wales very, very well in the first half. They controlled the match in a lot of departments. The midfield was able to run things. Very athletic midfield trio. I absolutely love it. Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, Yunus Musa is by far the strong point of this team. And although they weren't on their 100% A game, I think McKinney's passing was kind of quite poor, to be honest, but he also wasn't 100%. The first half looked really promising. A lot of energy, a lot of reason for optimism. And then I loved the interplay between the front three for the goal. I thought Sargent being capable of dropping off a little bit and allowing Pulisic and Weah to kind of almost just converge in a front two really, really helped things out a lot. And so it was a great goal. It was an unbelievably nice goal for the United States to score, because it's not the kind of goal they would have scored, I think, 4 or 8 years ago. The technical quality of this team was so high in comparison to years past. But when Kiefer Moore came on, he was like a magnet, and Wales were able to just kind of have it more possession, be a bit more joyous with it. Their tactics weren't particularly revolutionary. It was kick it to the tall guy, and he'll help with some guys around him. And I think it was just a case of a lost moment of focus from Zimmerman. It's just a dumb tackle. Just against a player's experience as Gareth Bale, as smart as him, he's always going to shield the ball with his body. And to try and tackle him from behind, I think a draw was
facing away from goal, no less. Yes,
it was a situation where, much like some of the yellow cards that the United States had in the first half, why were you tackling them like that there? Like what were you trying to accomplish? I'm sure the moment a lot of energy was bubbling out. I think a draw was very fair. We'll talk, I'm sure, about the implications of the draw in a little bit, but I don't think either team can ask for more from that match based on what they showed. I think they both had more to give. Could have been a bit better, but I think just the display we saw, 1-1, I think was very, very fair.
Daniel, you were more of a neutral observer on this one. What were your reactions from USA Wales?
I mean, I think it's a classic tale of two halves there. I mean, you see the US coming out with so much energy right from kickoff. And I think it overwhelmed Wales at the start. They could barely string 2 or 3 passes together. It was just a barrage of US attack. And it just, you knew the goal was coming. That was a great goal. And to kind of exploit that 3 at the back that Wales had, they needed to draw that one man out. And that's when Sargent sits in, as Jack was saying, it opens up that space where Weah and Pulisic can kind of attack through one of the gaps. And it worked perfectly. But then I think we went into the second half and Wales just showed their experience. The US is very inexperienced, and the Welsh team relatively is pretty experienced, albeit not in major tournaments, but they've got huge players who've played in massive games, and I think they showed it. The manager made a huge tactical change. Kiefer Moore should have been starting, realistically. He's playing well in the Premier League right now. And they utilized that. They used him as a textbook target man. It was old school British football. It was lump it to the big man and use your fast men around him. And it worked. The US didn't quite know what to do. And they utilized that. And I thought it was interesting. I didn't think Bale had a good game, yet he's the reason they didn't lose there. He got the penalty and he scored the penalty. So it just kind of goes to show if he does have a good game, then Wales could really be a threat because by all accounts, he didn't play well at all.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I echo both of your comments. I think that certainly the U.S. used a lot of energy and kind of ran circles around Wales in that first half. And, I really think Wales was set up to absorb pressure, to try to sit back, frustrate the U.S., and then spring, some kind of a counterattacking trap on them, knowing that they had Bale and they had his experience, and he didn't need to necessarily play a great game. He needed one moment, which is exactly what he got in that second half. However, the U.S. scoring when they did should have been decisive, because the U.S. should have at that point either been able to continue to pile on pressure and continue to essentially make it impossible for Wales to bring it forward, or they should have been able to sit back themselves, because Wales really didn't have the personnel or the legs to be able to constantly press against a U.S. team that was set up effectively in the back. And I think, not only is it a lack of experience on the part of the players, but some tactical naivete on the part of the U.S. coaching staff there, as they didn't really seem to know when to shift gears in this game. And the one time they did, when that bank of 3 subs comes in about the 65th or 70th minute, it was all the wrong substitutions, because at that point, you didn't bring in the right players to maintain any level of attack. It basically meant, okay, now you got to sit back. And then it was 3-4 minutes afterwards that you had the foul and then eventually the penalty. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think either side can feel hard done by with this result, because it was a fair result given the overall balance of things. And frankly, maybe Wales could feel a little hard done by that they didn't pick up a goal towards the end there, especially with that last play, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But overall, I do feel like this was an opportunity wasted for the United States, because that game was in their grasp if they had managed things a little bit better. And unfortunately, they just didn't.
100%, Galen. I think also from a Wales perspective, they may be upset that they didn't start. I'm harping on Kiefer Moore a lot, but it's just because his change just signaled a flip in the match the United States couldn't handle. If he starts from minute 1, I'm not sure the United States score in that first half, and I'm not sure that they come away with even a point in this one. Because I would have loved to see him play with Dan James up front, a guy as quick as he is, as technical as he is. That could have been a really nice combo, but I don't know if it was a direct sub between the two of them, but they didn't see too much, if any, time on the pitch together. So for me, it also was, I think, inexperience, as Daniel mentioned, was the perfect word to use, because they really, Berhalter, I think, also is just a little bit out of his depth tactically. I think we're seeing the limitations of him as a manager. Like, they did not really know what to do with plan B. And when they were kind of driving things, it was always kind of out there. They're hoping that nothing was going to kind of go against them. But I don't know. I loved, though, you mentioned it, Galen, very briefly, the cynical foul at the very end of the match. You've got Bale lining up he's scoring that goal. He's literally at the halfway line, but all of us knew that one's going in if he puts that shot off. So and their teammates as well, Acosta, just cleans him out from behind. And my dad said to me, I was watching with him, he was like, that's denial of clear goal scoring opportunity. I'm like, he's at the halfway line.
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
goal scoring opportunity, it's not clear. It is Gareth Bale, though. So I think if you factored that aspect into it, he's not very mobile. He can't really run in this day and age, but does he have a wand of a left foot? He will probably have that till the day he dies. That was fascinating to see.
Yeah, it's, Daniel, I do think it's tough, because I think to some degree Berhalter set his team up well and then didn't really make adaptations. So it's like it wasn't a complete tactical mishap on his part, but This isn't going to fly against England in this next match. Like if the U.S. tries to maintain like the same style of play, it's that, and it's also the substitutions that Gio Reyna must be injured, and if he's not injured, I got some real questions about putting Jordan Morris in when you've got 7 minutes, 8 minutes. Well, actually, it turned out to be 17 minutes with the 9 minutes of stoppage time that they decided to throw into this thing. That's a long time, and instead of having an incisive player who really understands where things are going, you bring Jordan Morris in. No offense, but that felt like the last of several questionable decisions from about the 45-minute mark on.
Yeah, I agree. I think there must be something going on behind the scenes with Gio Reyna, because he was arguably could have been in the starting 11. So for him to come on with 4 or 5 subs being rotated in, there's some questions that need to be raised there. What I also found interesting is for all the US's energy, they only got 1 shot on target. Yeah. And that's not going to cut it against the likes of England. It may not. They should beat Iran, as we have seen earlier. But 1 shot on target against Wales, who looked extremely shaky in that first half and looked incredibly overwhelmed. If you can only get 1 shot on target there, you have to make the most of that opportunity when Wales are completely under the cosh, and they just didn't particularly, other than the goal. So we'll see if they can go forward and take those opportunities, get some more shots on goal, and maybe Gio can come in and offer that outlet.
Well, and apparently Adam Cabe chimes in here. Thank you, Adam. On the live Fox postgame conversation, they just said Gio, quote, wasn't available for today, but will be Friday against England. All right. This has that kind of feels like I don't know, is Tom Allen managing the substitutions here? That's a fascinating thing that we wouldn't have heard that Reyna wasn't involved, but that does, I guess, to some degree excuse not bringing him in at that point. Let's pause the U.S. talk. We'll come back to them in a second, but I wanted to get to the other 2 games today. First, let's start with England against Iran. This one, when this started, I remember, I was on the Peloton this morning. I was like, I'm going to get up at 8 a.m. I'm going to bike 45 minutes and watch the first half. And, they're singing the anthems. Well, at least England was singing their anthem. Iran isn't singing their anthem. And I'm on the bike and I text my buddy. I was like, England could win this 5-0. And I was off only by a couple of goals as the Iranians were not singing the national anthem. They looked like they were definitely not into this game whatsoever. And after an extensive and rather questionable injury situation that occurred very early on with the Iranian, you could watch the Iranian goalkeeper's nose break on international television as another player slammed into his face on a cross. But from that point forward, Iran was not the same. They bring in the substitute goalkeeper. He does not really have it. And I don't think it would have mattered anyway. And England just steamrolls Iran in this game. Daniel, this had to have been everything that you were hoping for and more in this contest.
Oh, 100%. I think there's always some uncertainty going into a tournament with any team, but especially England. There's always a lot of hope among the England fans. And then sometimes they get there and just perform pretty dreadfully. But immediately from kickoff, just everyone looked calm and composed and looked ready to go forward and attack, which is something we haven't seen from England teams of the past. Been so conservative, so defensive. But the fact that had the likes of Saka, Sterling, Bellingham all pushing forward and going directly at the defenders it's a joy to see as an England fan, because it's just something we haven't seen. But I thought tactically we looked very good. I was happy that we played a 4 at the back and not a 5 at the back, which had been rumored. I think we look a lot better 4 at the back, playing a classic 4-3-3, very attacking, because it frees another centre mid. When you've got someone like Declan Rice who can hold down that pivot role in between, just sitting above the centre backs, it freed Bellingham. Bellingham had so much space today. He controlled the game, and he was just pinging balls, crossing the pitch left to right, cutting through the angles, and it just opened up the field completely for the likes of Saka and Sterling to get their goals.
Yeah, I mean, it was there was a lot of commentary on Gareth Southgate, like taking the shackles off of this team. I think he said that himself. I don't think that the shackles would have mattered against Iran, even under normal circumstances, but this was just an offensive free-for-all, Jack. And from, some likely suspects, but to get a goal out of Bellingham, to get a goal out of Jack Grealish at the end, Saka scoring a couple of goals. I mean, everybody but Harry Kane, but Kane was very involved in the offensive buildup, had some wonderful passes. I mean, you got about everything that you could have possibly wanted out of England in this game, except for maybe a clean sheet.
Yeah, 100%. I personally loved the supplementary role Kane was able to provide, because this match was never going to test the tactical genius of England, of Gareth Southgate. It was never going to test his willingness to go to a back four, because I agree with Daniel. This is just a better team when you have more of your talented forwards on the pitch. If you can minimize the number of center backs from England you've got on the field, you're in a better spot than typical. Trippier would look very, very good at right back. Shaw, I think, was a solid option at left back. So overall, I think the whole could be a bit better in terms of the defensive performance from England, which is maybe the big takeaway. I think I saw Southgate's post-match. He kind of was like, it could have been better, could have been 6-0. And I was like, all right, you're holding him to a bit of a high standard there, Gareth. But I also 100% agree with Daniel. Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham are, it's not quite at the level that you had with the Gerrard, Scholes, Lampard whole deal, but they may complement each other better in terms of how they're able to play with one another, where you have Declan Rice able to carry the water, and Jude Bellingham, a guy who, as a Liverpool fan, he's been linked heavily, and we've been wanting to kind of shore him into this Gerrard box-to-box role. Get him by the 18. Get him in a spot where he's able to create chances and be very aggressive with the space that you mentioned, Daniel, and he's going to be one of the best players in the world. He's 19, and he opened their scoring. So great to see that kind of work there. I'm also a big Mason Mount fan. I know many are polarized on him. England's got a lot of good options, and for Bukayo Saka to get a pair of goals as well, if it's not Harry Kane having to carry the entire brunt of things up front, that's an incredibly positive sign. And I think it's always going to be a case of, will the United States offer much more of a threat than Iran did? Remains to be seen. But I think that this was a great launching point. A lot of confidence should be taken from this result, and I think that seeing it happen at the World Cup for England, it does give me a lot more confidence that they can repeat this in a performance or two, or throughout the entire World Cup, where I thought maybe an early exit might be with them, maybe even a weird group stage situation like 2014. This is a really, really dangerous team. I think they asserted their authority exactly as they were supposed to here in today's game.
Well, it's interesting because in the 18 World Cup, they needed a late goal from Kane to get 3 points against Tunisia. And I mean, Iran was worse than Tunisia that year, but I don't know how much worse they were. And it does feel like a lot of the questions, Daniel, about the attitude or the confidence level or the focus of this England team, coming out of the Nations League performances and just kind of a lot of uncertainty and the wear and tear of the Premier League season thus far, how much that was going to weigh on them. It didn't look like it mattered at all. It's hard. This is the one thing that I guess I would be a little bit cautious of if I was England. How much of that was them being dominant and how much of that was Iran just really not belonging on the pitch? Maybe they belong. I mean, certainly they're 20th ranked team in FIFA. It's not like overall they didn't belong, but certainly where that squad is at mentally and emotionally right now, they look like they wanted to be kind of anywhere else. So I would caution a little bit on the English front to get too overconfident based upon these, but it's so much of this is emotional and mental, and this idea that, hey, we just went out and won by 4 goals in our first game and we scored 6 goals, that has to carry you pretty far from a mental perspective.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think that the England fans will probably be a little bit too optimistic after this result, but that is very typical of an English fan. I really hope Southgate has their head screwed on. I think he will. What I really liked was the likes of Saka and Rashford getting on the score sheet, especially after their last performance in a major tournament, which was missing penalty in the Euro final. And they got bombarded with disgusting racial attacks afterwards by English fans. So for them to go to this World Cup and pretty much control the game themselves, I think that's brilliant. And I think it just quiets those idiotic England fans. And hopefully they'll realize how stupid they were to ever even think that or to say that. But I think the confidence levels are going to be really high. And I think especially after the Wales and US game, where neither team really took the game by the scruff of the neck, I think England will look at that and think that we've got a good chance against both of those teams. If we play like we did, as attacking as we did, neither of those teams are going to be able to stop them defensively.
Yeah, and we're going to get to the implications of that here in a minute. Before we get to well, you know what? Actually, let's stick with this because it's kind of a Group B thing. We'll get to that Group A thing first. I will say today's results felt like a worst case scenario for the United States for the following reasons. A, England's on a +4 goal differential and has 6 goals scored. Now, whether or not the U.S. was going to be able to actually compete with England in terms of like supremacy in the group, that was certainly up for debate. But now England's got 3 points and Wales has 1, and Wales gets to play Iran. And if Iran looks as bad in that game as they looked in the game today, that's going to leave Wales waltzing out of Friday with 4 points. If the U.S. doesn't win against England, that puts them on 2 points headed into that last day. And now it puts even greater pressure just to get at least 1 point out of that England game. Because if you can't even do that, now England is essentially qualified on 6 points. They don't have to play against Wales. And that puts Wales in a great position to pick up a win and essentially waltz through. It's like you just really, I don't think, could have asked for a worse combination of results other than a loss for the U.S., given the combination of things. Jack, am I overreacting to things here, or where are you at with this?
I don't think you're overreacting personally. I said similar things considering the order of opponents for the United States, because you have your one-on-one head match. I think you have to view the group from a very cynical best way to get out, most likely way to get out perspective, and say you're going to lose to England. I do not think the United States are going to beat England. I think they'll lose that head-to-head matchup. And so that's match day 2 that you're going to lose to England. So if you're heading to that match with not 3 points, so we have 1 point in this scenario, Wales can put themselves in the driver's seat where they hold all the cards in the final match week. If the United States can get a point against England, it's very, very hard. It gives you much better strength. But now you are thrusting yourself in a spot where by not handling things against Wales, they almost are in the better position in terms of qualifying. I would say England are, 1 foot through the door in terms of qualifying. Then Wales are the second most likely team to qualify now, because I don't think England would, in a scenario where they beat the United States and Wales beat Iran, I don't think they would just kind of say, all right, we're through. We're able to kind of just coast things and then go for an Austria, West Germany style draw where they, what draw will get both teams through.
Hey, someone was paying attention in class. That's good to see. Okay.
Look at that. I don't think they would do that, knowing that a draw would get them both through. But there's also that subliminal aspect where a draw gets you first place in the group. So are you going to be going, all out for a challenge, hurt yourself, get yourself sent off, a booking, especially for a match? It's awkward for the United States. It's not over. I'm not, hitting the panic button. You can't after the first match, especially because there were a lot of reasons to be positive. I almost am more optimistic that the United States could get a result off of England after seeing that, but I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not sitting in that boat either. So really, it's awkward. It's not easy, but it's the World Cup. It's not meant to be some sort of cakewalk to get yourself out of the group stage, especially when you have a Wales team, which are very experienced and are very comparable in terms of their world standing to the United States.
Daniel, what's your take on this situation?
Yeah, I don't think by any means the U.S. are out of this. I really do think the U.S. will pose a threat to the English defense. I mean, Maguire and Stones actually played very well today, to be fair to them. But we know Maguire's coming off an absolute horrid stretch. Stones is historically shaky, although a very good ball-playing defender. They weren't tested today. They conceded 2 goals. One of them was a pop shot out of nowhere, and one was a very dubious penalty. That front 3 of the US and the middle 3 of the US will test England for sure. And if they can grab a goal, potentially they could hold on for a draw. But I think we saw today England's firepower up front is extremely dangerous. And I don't know if that US defense will be able to contain them. But that the English defense will most certainly be tested. And I think the US just has to go for it. It's a situation where you've really got to go for a result. You can't just sit back and let the English barrage come at you. It's not going to work that way because they will break you down. But I still think it's up for grabs. Wales and England will be a tight match just because of the geopolitical status of that game. It's always a fiery affair. The Welsh players always want to prove something. A lot of them are born in England and arguably English. So they will be ready for that match and everything will be on the line for them, realistically.
Updated numbers from 538. This is courtesy of Paul Carr tweeting this out. But the U.S. now with a 45% chance of advancing out of the group. It was 53% pre-tournament. England all the way up to 93%, which is not surprising. They were always odds-on favorite to advance. Wales at 37% now, and Iran at 25%. So, the number is still slightly in the favor of the United States. And it's really, I think, at this point, going to come down to a bunch of factors that we can't quite get our heads wrapped around as of yet. Some of which is, how does Iran play in game 2 when they're taking on Wales? Then that should, I think England was able to take advantage of Iran's kind of overall discombobulation today. And that may not be what goes on Friday in that game. I mean, Iran, I would expect, is going to, put a much more consistent effort out there. And Wales doesn't really have the players to open up Iran the same way that England did. And it's unlikely that Iran would lose their goalkeeper in the first 15 minutes for a second game in a row. So, maybe all of that ends up assisting in some way. But I'll tell you, if Wales tries to approach the Iran game the same way they approached the first half of the USA game, they might not score because that Iranian team, as they mentioned on the telecast, does know how to set back in a deep block and keep teams from being able to come onto them effectively. And somehow I get a sense that Iran's not going to foul Gareth Bale in the box and just surrender a penalty. So that we'll see how things go there. But a lot to keep an eye on as we move forward through this group. Anyway, we got a little bit of time left. Let's talk about the other game that happened today, the last game out of Group A, Senegal, Netherlands. Daniel, I'm going to start with you. This was an entertaining game. It was a back and forth game. It was a surprising game. I was really, really positively surprised at how sprightly Senegal looked and how competitive they were. And it looked like they were going to hang on for at least a 0-0 draw. And then the Netherlands put some stuff together at the very end and ends up getting a 2-0 victory. People are going to look at that result 10 years from now and be like, oh, that was not a close game. When in reality, that game really looked in doubt for most of the contest.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one where if a football match was 80 minutes and at the end of 80 minutes it was 0-0, you'd say Senegal were probably hard done by not to get a win out of that. But then you come into the last 10 minutes of regular time and you think, yeah, Netherlands deserved that. They put in, obviously there was another 9 minutes of stoppage time. So they put in 20 minutes of classic Dutch football and they just played very well for 20 minutes and that got them across the line. But I think considering, obviously the key talking point is no Sadio Mane for Senegal, they put up a very good fight. They really tested that very strong backline of the Netherlands. And they really could have got a goal into the back of the net. They took 15 shots, 4 shots on target against the Netherlands. That's very impressive considering you're without your star man, your talisman, which everything runs through. You didn't have much time at all to prepare a new tactical set to run, but they did. They showed heart, and I almost feel a little bit sad that they didn't come away with a point there. It's now the group's tough. I think Ecuador are now in pole position to take that second spot.
Yeah, Ecuador's got to be feeling really good about where they're at with things coming out of this set of results. Jack, the Netherlands, I expected more out of them, which is weird to say for a team that had a 2-0 victory. And look, I think Senegal probably surprised the Netherlands as much as they surprised everybody else in terms of how competitive they were. Concern with the Dutch coming out of that competition? Or is it just like, well, we got through that one. We got a +2 goal differential. Now we just move on and go to the next game.
I mean, for me, concern would indicate that I had higher expectations for the Dutch team. And me personally, I just think this team is quite limited in a lot of facets. I think they've got some nice pieces. I think Cody Gakpo has been an incredibly informed player for PSV this year. I'm interested to see if this is going to be his breakout moment, because he's been rumored to be making that leap to another top 5 European league. Great goal. Unbelievable link up with Frankie de Jong, who I think this is a solid match from him by his standards. My other midfielders, is a great match. I think if he can get to the peak of his powers, they've got a really, really good player in him. They were kind of just like, it felt like in second gear for most of the match. They just couldn't quite get that final bit going. But I think you got to give some credit to Senegal, who left it all out there. They knew that they were without their decisive piece in Sadio Mane.
Well, and we got to give him credit too. I mean, they tested that Dutch keeper.
Yes.
I mean, and that's not a guy from. I was joking, texting with my friends, like, is this the greatest moment in SC Heerenveen history worldwide? I mean, this is not a name brand keeper that the Dutch have out there, and he made some outstanding saves that really kept the Dutch in the game.
Yeah, no, it was saves that I think he would have expected himself to make, but it was a big test, and Senegal did not make it easy for the Dutch at all. And that's how you expect every team to be here at this stage of this kind of competition. So I don't think I'm majorly concerned. It'll be Ecuador versus the Netherlands in the next matchup between them. So that'll kind of be the two teams that are most likely to go through after we saw how Ecuador kind of just handled Qatar yesterday. I'd be interested to see if maybe the Netherlands, maybe there is a bit more to be concerned about here, and they're looking more of a second place finish. And if Ecuador can have a good performance against them, I don't really know what to expect long term with them. I just think they're your classic round of 16 quarterfinals team that's going to handle who they should handle, but they just are going to lack that spark. And I think that the only reason they were able to win the match 2-0 very much favored them. It was a 1-0 victory at most. You obviously saw the great link up from de Jong and the nice run from Gakpo, but Mendy did not cover himself in glory for either of the goals. He shot up incredibly fast in the global ranks with Chelsea, becoming one of the best goalies in the world when they won the Champions League. And then he as quickly has fallen back down to earth almost 12 months later from being, I think he was in the team of the year. He's an okay option, but I think he could have done better in the first. And then he kind of just had a weak save for Klaassen to get the second goal. And that was a pretty devastating second goal to concede, because if you're doing a way to get out, you got to try and in that head-to-head against Ecuador, win by 2 at least. That's where it really was a big impactful one, where they kind of went for it late and kind of lost the chance there late on.
Well, and the one fascinating thing I think about that group is that Senegal gets to play Qatar, who, as Daniel and I talked about yesterday, looked horrific. Like Iran looked bad, but Iran just looked distracted. Like Iran looked like their heads weren't in the game. Qatar looked like they didn't belong on the field. Or the pitch, sorry, Daniel. And, the fact that Senegal gets to play them, I mean, Senegal could put 2 or 3 goals past Qatar, and I don't see a whole lot of offensive, opportunity coming for Qatar in that game. And Netherlands plays Ecuador, and that will be fascinating, because if Senegal can get points out of that, at least they put themselves in the mix for the final match day in the group. But it's just kind of fascinating the way that the games play out there, and maybe that's what Senegal needs, because they could make that second goal up relatively quickly just by scoring a lot against Qatar. It'll be a very fascinating remainder of the group as things go through. Gents, as we wrap up for today, just a reminder for everybody: there's 4 games on tomorrow, starting at 5 a.m. Eastern time. This is where Daniel wishes he was in England as opposed to being in the U.S., as that game would be coming on at a very normal 10 o'clock in the morning, as opposed to this, right?
Pubs would be open already. That would have been perfect, but sacrifices have to be made. Not to be.
Well, anyway, you could probably, frankly, sleep in for that first game, as it's Argentina versus Saudi Arabia, and that might be a bigger margin than England had today against Iran.
The highlights for that will do. You'll see a Messi goal or 2. You'll see some nice movements, but the 4-minute video compilation, you'll get an extra 3 hours of sleep, and you'll appreciate yourself for that.
But the other games tomorrow, and I'm curious, which one are you most looking forward to? We've got Denmark, Tunisia at 8 a.m. Eastern time, Mexico, Poland at 11, and then France versus Australia at 2. Jack, you first. Which game are you looking forward to the most?
I'd say Mexico, Poland. I think that's one where both of these teams kind of, I think you'd favor Poland just based on paper, but it's kind of open. It's kind of up there. So that's the one that I'm kind of just most intrigued about. I don't know if it'll live up to it's not got like a great, I think on paper battle there, but I think it's going to be the one that could illuminate us the most out of the ones that could be tomorrow.
Danny, how about you?
I'm interested in that France-Australia game. I think, will we see the World Cup curse, the World Cup winners curse again? And Australia will give anyone a game. They're just very organized. They're feisty. They're aggressive. And France look a little bit of a mess right now. So that could be a fun one. France obviously expected to win, but it'll be interesting to see if Australia could maybe get a point out of that.
Yeah, no, that should be a fascinating one. I'll be curious if Australia can give them a game. For me, this worked out perfectly. We didn't plan this in advance. I'm interested in that Denmark-Tunisia game because I really think Denmark, if they play to their maximum ability, is an absolute dark horse in this tournament. Like that is a team that could make it to the semifinals. I think they have the talent, they have the organization, they played really well in the Euros, and they have a favorable path. And honestly, I mean, depending how the game goes against France when they end up playing France, that could end up deciding who the winner of that group is. So a lot on the line tomorrow. Should be a fascinating array of games. We'll be back here on Pod of the Century at about the same time tomorrow, about 4:30 in the afternoon. I think we got a new crew coming in to give commentary and analysis on the game. So be sure to tune in. Guys, any final thoughts on today before we wrap up? Daniel, you first.
I think I'm just excited for Friday, that US-England game. I think the excitement's going to be immense, honestly, especially coming after Thanksgiving. People are going to be with their families, everyone huddled around the TV, new people watching the sport potentially. I think it's going to be great.
Jack?
My favorite part is the confusion of many Americans. I've had to explain to many of my friends, it was a draw today. What does that mean? And I was like, all right, this is a real reversion to basics here. What does a draw mean? It means 1 point, guys. That's what it means.
I will say ratings are up all over the place. Like the ratings for yesterday's match, we got this from Fox, are up like nationwide, like 47% over what they were in 2018. And in some markets like Philadelphia, it's up 130% over what the opening match was. So clearly people are watching, and who knows, maybe this is the type of year that the World Cup has to happen in order to get the maximal TV ratings. Everybody's not on vacation. I'm kidding, Daniel. Don't. But no, in all seriousness, it is cool to see that many people watching. I wish they'd gotten a better result today, at least here in the U.S., but should be fascinating as we move forward. Anyway, we will go ahead and wrap up for today. My thanks to all you folks for listening. Be sure to tune in tomorrow, Match Day 3 analysis for Daniel, for Jack. I'm Galen Clavier. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. So long, everybody.